Hello and welcome to episode 52 of the Motivational Millennial podcast. That's 1 year.
Woohoo!
1 year.
We made it.
Woo! We're so excited about this.
We had grit.
We had grit. We don't quit.
We don't quit. We've got grit.
Amazing. So yeah, this is a great episode for the 1 year mark and perfect timing because happy Mother's Day. Happy belated Mother's Day. It happened a couple of days ago. But today we have this amazing guest who is a mom, who is an entrepreneur, who is incredibly passionate about her work, insightful, beautiful person. Her name is Evangelia LeClaire. No relation, but we just have super badass last names. But this couldn't be any more perfect timing, so we hope that you enjoy our conversation with her. Before we jump in, Blake has a bit of an update he would like to share with you all.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we have been booking tons of these growth mindset assemblies in K through 12 schools across the country. August is completely full. September is completely full all over. And we are so excited. If you have a child, speaking of Mother's Day, or know a child that goes to a school, or are a teacher or a principal, or any way related to the educational system, feel free to drop a line. We are doing discounted booking for another week or so, and we'd love to stop by your school or a school near you and talk about how students' brains can grow, how they've got grit, because they don't quit, and really helping students embrace this love of learning, this love of discovery, this acceptance of the challenges that come up when we learn, and ultimately to persist and be strong in their education and their personal lives. So feel free to hit me up. You could just do it at Blake at motivationalmillennial, 2 L's, 2 N's, 1 L.com. That's not my entire email address.
Smooth.
Oh, thank you. Motivationalmillennial.com. And otherwise, stick around after the conversation with Evangelia for the after show when Ivy and I go into an impassioned conversation based on some of the great insights that Evangelia shared.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Onward.
Onward, upward, to mothers!
Woo! Hello and welcome to the Motivational Millennial podcast, where we talk with inspiring members of the millennial generation who are living life with a sense of purpose and achieving their dreams. I'm Ivy LeClaire.
And I'm Blake Brandis.
Our Motivational Millennial guest today is Evangelia LeClaire. Evangelia is an expert career coach at the Muse and the founder of Career Ready, Set, Rock, an independent consultancy for millennial women, moms, and moms-to-be who want to make more moves, money, and meaning in their lives and careers. Evangelia has gone from a Fortune 100 company career to a startup called Dream Careers that she helped grow globally. There, she helped young people discover and pursue their career dreams. Although Evangelia is a career strategist who swears by strengths assessments and action plans, at heart she believes that the greatest life blessings and lessons come from being present, surrendering, and having faith. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Ivy and Blake. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're here. And I just want to take a second to talk about LeClaire. This is amazing. You even wrote in the bio, no relation. Like, I love that our last names are homophones right now. It's amazing. So I just wanted to shout out for that. So we'd love to hear more about what you're up to right now and what you love about it.
Yeah. Okay. So really what comes top to mind always is I am a mom. First, I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. So shifting in and out of career and all other types of responsibilities, sometimes I just can't get my mind off of my kids because they're with me all the time practically. Mm-hmm. So I'm a mom, and I also am working on building my business, Career Ready, Set, Rock, and really figuring out at this point in my journey how to integrate all of who I am into my career, because both my career, both my spirituality, both being a mom and all of those roles and all of my identities are so important to who I am and what I do. And I don't want to compartmentalize them because they just bleed into my day to day. So I'm just really learning how to be that who I am at all times, both, personally and in my business. Show up, just really show up.
I think that's a pretty common millennial challenge, as we do have these high expectations that we should be able to be all the things and all the things at the same time. And so how have you seen your identity shift from your career trajectory before becoming a mom to now that that's such a central part of who you are?
Well, it's been a challenge. So a lot of who I was before I was a mom, my identity was very much attached to my career, specifically because I've always been in a very purposeful career that was very mission driven. And so having worked for a company where my mission was tied into what the company that I represented, I had that identity attachment that was very difficult to transition from, having left that job at Dream Careers. But really what expanded within me was I hit a point in my career where I felt like I was no longer expanding at my former job, Dream Careers. I had my first child who was 6 months, and I began to recognize his own growth milestones. And it caused me to really reflect inward and say, well, how am I growing personally and professionally? And that was a trigger for me to figure out what was next in my own life and career. So to go back into answering your question, the transition has been really figuring out my own identity separate of my career, separate of my kids, and really showing up to that and just being accepting of who I am separate of those things. So it's a continuous journey of peeling back the layers of me, but I think that's always been the theme of my life.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like personal growth and that lens has been really important to you. And what I'm hearing from what, you said a couple of minutes ago, it's like you've been learning and understanding all of these separate parts of your identity, and now you're in this place of wanting to merge them into one, like really looking at all of these separate pieces into like the greater whole of your multifaceted being. It's like the next level and the next phase.
Yeah. And, I think that it's true. And what's been important to me that perhaps I didn't always share in the workforce is like authenticity and self-expression. And even having been in a company where we valued that, I felt like I was in a role where, well, I have to represent the brands. And so there's parts of me that I have to kind of filter. And here I am with my own business and still wanting to serve a larger market. And there's that, you and I spoke about this earlier, Ivy. It's like, who and how much of yourself do you share? And that's why I resonated with you, because you just kind of like put yourself out there.
Well, thank you.
Or part of yourself.
Yeah. Well, so what does it mean to you to be authentic and self-expressed?
Part of it fluctuates, because I think what it really means is accepting who you are in the moment and where you're at, and I think that taking off that self-criticism is really important, because I think I used to have a fear of being judged, and I don't know where that came from. I think it's because I like to be somebody who likes to please everybody, or used to at least. So going into being authentic, I also recognize that we're multifaceted. And for me personally, I think I'm a very dynamic and intense person. And there are times where I'm not as intense and like totally peaceful. And then there's times where I'm like a bull coming out of a china shop. So it's like accepting that, I think, is really important.
I love that metaphor.
I know it's such an overly used metaphor. But yeah, so it's like just accepting that and not caring, who will judge you, but also recognizing that for me personally, it's like, I'm not a bad person. So if I'm this way one day and I'm this way the other day, it's like, why should I even be judging myself? It's hard for me to explain, but I think I used to be overly conscientious about just being consistent in my being, but we're dynamic individuals overall as humans. So.
Did you see some of your own struggles mirrored in the people you were helping figure out their careers and their life paths?
Not at the time, because no, not at the time, to be honest. because I had saw myself having gone through those before, but I didn't recognize those struggles. What I'm struggling with today is not what I struggled with when I was serving, and even when I'm serving my clients. But I do recognize certain patterns. So I see right now, I think I'm in a pattern of just really going forward in the faith and the certainty that I need to have to continue to go forward in my path, in my career. And I see that some of the people that I serve, most of them are still in that pattern of discovery. Like, what do I do next? Or how do I go after it? So I think I've gone through that phase multiple times, and sometimes I shift into that phase of discovery. But I've always known who I am. It's just that I also struggle with doubt and then having to just like reclaim my faith. So I think, to answer your question, Blake, yes, I think that there's universal patterns, but I don't look at my clients and say, I'm struggling with this too.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that makes a lot of sense. Is there a particular intervention or idea that you've used with your clients that you've seen be really powerful or helpful, guiding them on their path of discovery?
Yeah. So overall, the way I see things are in phases, and discovery is one of the phases. So I learned back about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit shorter than 15 years ago, a framework to help go through the process of discovering and pursuing your dreams. And this framework was taught to me by Brian Bunce, a former colleague of mine. And one of those phases is discovery. And then another one is awakening. And another phase is support. And another phase is really embracing the desert. There's different phases that we go through. So initially, when I meet with clients who are ready to really explore more inward, I talk to them that there are phases. So there are phases from a spiritual level in going about pursuing your dreams. And then there's phases from a tactical career strategy perspective in pursuing your job. Now, those are two separate things that I'm now learning I want to intersect. I want people, and the challenge that I have is sometimes a client may come to me and say, I want my resume revised. And because I'm that person that wants to focus on the big picture transformation and strategy, I want to turn things upside down, and I have to reframe. So I have to refrain from revealing the whole big thing, because I need to meet people where they're at and then help them see. So when I do meet with, as an example, a client who might come for a one-off service like resume revision, I do have to look at them and say, where do you want to be? And how can we then position your professional brand assets and really explore what's in your heart and what you've done in the past and what you desire to do to get you to that place, to where you want to be. And then we can also work on your professional brand assets to align you there. So I will still complete their resume, but I also want them to look at all these other variables that are important.
Yeah, that's beautiful to bring in that full picture of the whole person. So what phase are you in right now?
Good question. In this moment, I was in a phase of doubt, but I think that's just like the mom stuff that sometimes kicks in when you're like, oh my God, like, how can I do this? You know, how can I manage this all? But like, I think from a big picture perspective in my season I'm in a season of conviction. I'm in a season of faith, certainty.
So faith is something that you actually mentioned in your bio. And so you were mentioning that now you're kind of in this phase of conviction and faith. So how do you feel that bringing this faith sort of more into the forefront, or prioritizing it in a way, or leaning into it in a way, is supporting you moving forward?
Well, I've had moments where you try and control so much when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a mom. There's so many variables that you're trying, or that you just by nature have to like control the levers on, especially when you're a parent. Like, it just intensifies. And so when things aren't moving at a pace in which you'd like them to move, or when your kids aren't behaving a certain way that you like them to behave, it could be really frustrating. And so I've always received blessings when I've learned to kind of relinquish that control. And I've had moments where I've tried so hard to push things forward and help fix situations, and I just couldn't fix them. And I just kind of surrendered them. And I've received massive blessings as a result of my ability to surrender to my faith. And so where I'm at today is I have those experiences and I know them to be true. But in the last year, being this mom with 2 kids and trying to build a business and also feeling like I was on a short runway to build a business and do these things, meaning short runway, my mentality was I have limited time to make things happen. My faith was really tested. I went through a lot of seasons of doubt, uncertainty, and some of that is hormonal, some of that is reality, some of that is what's in my mind, right? And recently I just came out of it really doubting my purpose and prescribing to another quote unquote guru's methodology. And I began writing and following this prescription. It was basically a book that I read. And I was like, oh, let me follow this book and let me tap into my badass self. Sorry if I can't use that word. Can
totally
I use that
word? You're such a
okay.
badass.
So I was like journalizing and really tapping into my badass self so that I can get my mind in a right frame of mind so that I can like continue to conquer and achieve in all these areas that I wanted to really, work on in my life. And then I received this overwhelming amount of presence and love that was like, no, like you don't need to tap into your badass self. Like it's already on its way. And like, I believe that was like a message and a blessing. And it was like a reality for me. Well, it wasn't a reality. It was really sent by grace that was like, wow, thank you. Thank you for listening. Like, I feel like, so my point is my faith really comes at the point where I'm like completely doubting myself and completely not even seeking, but more like doubting. And then all of a sudden, like I get this message that's like, wait, like you're already on your way. Like you don't need to do what these people are telling you to do. Like you just need to continue to do what you're doing and have faith that you're on your way. And so I guess that's really, helped me in life.
Yeah, I love the idea that faith is actually built on doubt.
Yeah.
Because if you have certainty, then you don't normally feel that you need faith. So that's a really great reminder. Thank you. And what would you say is the biggest dream that you've achieved so far? And in what ways have you had to grow to achieve it?
Looking back on my life in the last 15 years, I really believe that my greatest dreams I would have never even dreamt for myself. And it's having worked for this company called Dream Careers. I was one of the first employees to come on board, and I worked with amazing people to help build this mission. I helped write the mission to just help inspire, challenge, and equip people to discover and pursue their dreams. In the course of my career at Dream Careers, we helped over 15,000 people get on this path. Most of these people were young individuals in and coming out of college on this path to really pursue and find purpose and find a job out of college. And to know that I participated in that 15 years ago and helped like start this movement is probably one of my biggest things. But what also happened within that, which was a greater miracle, was I met my husband through the company. We both used to work for that company for about 9 years. And now we have 2 kids together. And we're both dreamers and doers. So that's my biggest, I think, greatest accomplishment and dream achieved.
That's really amazing how something interestingly that I was thinking about today, how sometimes these decisions that seem kind of small in that, like how we met actually, like, if I hadn't been on the podcast, Discover Your Talent, you wouldn't have heard me and met. And it's just like such amazing beauty. So the fact that you started working for that job, you wouldn't have thought, okay, I'm going to find my husband here and we're going to, like it's so amazing how life leads you this way. And that to me kind of ties back in with the faith piece and the trust piece, like knowing that you're moving forward and you don't even know the possibilities that each decision could lead for you. Yeah.
Definitely.
Which of your accomplishments has surprised you the most? Like when you look back at it, you think, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did that.
Yeah. I will be honest, even with all that I've done, I think the thing that my husband I mean, me personally, I'm just like, I still can't believe we have 2 kids. Like, it's really hard to, even the day before my son was born, I was like, I'm going through an abyss right now. And there was an extreme level of uncertainty that I didn't realize I could ever feel. And that's that intensity of not knowing how your life will change right after you have a child was one of the scariest things. And to now be at a place where I have 2 kids and I'm still trying to and believe that I can build upon my greatest dreams is, I think, the greatest success I've ever achieved.
Yeah, I actually think it's really impressive that you are consciously creating the environment for growth and support for your children, but also giving them this additional gift of really pursuing, in addition, your passion and things that are really important to you. It's like, I mean, sister, I bow to you in that. Like, I just think that that's just so, badass, because when I think of, I'm not a mother. And so when I think about having children, I know that for my friends and people close to me who become mothers, it's like, and become parents, there's no possible way you can even prepare for that. Like, you can't read like enough books or listen to enough podcasts. Like, there's something that shifts inside you. And so just really hearing you speak about that, and then also looking at your identity around your dreams, is really inspiring to me.
Thank you so much.
And what would you say is the most significant challenge that you've faced so far? And what was it like to overcome it?
So the biggest challenge that I faced was having 2 parents who became mentally ill. And I was 13 at the time. And so my parents separated. And both as a result of the separation and even leading up to it, had gone through some really traumatic mental illnesses. And I, at the time, was a teenager, really learning and figuring out my own identity at the time. And I really took on a place of really being an anchor for my family, for my father, really wanting to pour love into my mom and my father. And, having a sister as well who was a teenager going through adolescence. It was really, really challenging for me. And, while I could have and had explored, typical teenage stuff that was going on at the time, I really became conscious about wellness and positive psychology and faith. Because to answer your question more directly, Blake, I didn't really find mentors. I didn't really open up about what I was experiencing at the time. I was going through that challenge with my parents from age 13 to really 22. Sometimes it creeps up now, but now everything's like really great with both my parents, thankfully. But during that time, because I really didn't open myself up to what I was experiencing to anyone, I really found faith. And that was my greatest saving grace.
Thank you for sharing that. How do you feel like going through that period of having to be the anchor for the family shaped your own sense of worthiness? Or it sounds like from what you said earlier, you've always been very attuned to what other people need and want. Do you feel like that experience shaped that perspective for you?
Yes, for sure. I think I became very sensitive to taking care of well-being. Overall mental wellness is something that I became very sensitive to, how we speak, how we think, how we act toward one another. I became sensitive to gossip and negativity. So I really would try to limit that me being part of that, or me really giving that off, because you never really, I became empathetic to what people were experiencing, because knowing that I had experienced that at a young age and had gone through like a midlife crisis at age 18, as my uncle would have had said to me at the time. Mm-hmm. It's like I always wonder, like, on the surface, what are they going through? Okay, they're coming to me because they want a career, they want to change their job, but what's really underneath there? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the nitty gritty.
So all of that I've become very interested in as a result of my own experience.
And have there been some moments in working with your clients over the years where someone has come to you for ostensibly career advice, but you actually see they are looking for something deeper or some more fundamental experience or change in their lives?
Yeah. I will be honest in saying that I tend to be more of a strategist and a visionary than a let's dive deeper and peel back the layers of your past. So no, I can't say that I've ever gotten there fully with my clients. But what I do, where the extent of where I allow myself to go with my clients is the basics. What are your values? What are your passions? What are your skills? And what are some milestone moments that really have triggered you to want to be where you want to be, or have triggered where you feel most energized in your life? We never go through the deep stuff, the psychology stuff of what may have impacted their past.
Well, it's amazing because doing values work and looking at those moments that you were most energized and figuring out your passion, I mean, that in and of itself is rare for people. That can be deep as well, for people to be looking at that, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think part of the gift of what you're giving people is really being seen for who they are, for what they want, and for where they want to go. And I'm sure that's pretty rare for most people in the world. So, yeah, that's really powerful.
So what advice would you like to give to other millennials who are on a journey toward fulfillment and success?
The advice I really want to give is find some really good people whom have revealed themselves truly, the raw, the ugly, and have either revealed that of themselves on social media or in person or over the phone or on a podcast, and have those people as part of your circle of mentors that you follow, because we could see so many things are filtered through the lens of Instagram. There's this overwhelming sense of comparisonitis and analysis paralysis that I think people allow themselves to experience because our lives are on social media. And it's just a facade to me. So when you hear people this podcast and people like you, Ivy, where you reveal your true self and these things that are real, continue to follow those people because that's reality. So I think it's important to really have a good lens of what's real and what's a facade, and also just surround yourself with people who are authentically expressing all of themselves, and or at least strive for that.
That's some important advice, I think.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that you are here sharing your, authentic story. And I mean, it's so true. That is some great advice, because in this world and in this culture, we have this set of expectations in looking and acting a certain way that eventually become internalized. And I think being able to express yourself authentically like you're doing now and being around people who are doing it, it's like it kind of seeps into you. It becomes normalized and you're like, oh, this is good. And it can feel so empowering to do so and really be seen in that way.
Definitely.
Is there a book or quote that's changed the direction of your life in some way?
Yes. I love The Success Principle and by Jack Canfield. And the reason why I like it is because it has 60 plus principles that are related to career, finances, professional development, self-help stuff, all bundled into one book and easy to read chapters. So I like to digest things like that, versus one big book on, mindset. This has all of it in one big book. So
fabulous. Why don't you check that out? I don't think I've read. Have you read that book?
I haven't.
Great. We'll put that on our list. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So based on your experience, what unique challenges, either internal or external, do you feel like the millennial generation face?
Oh, I probably answered that question prematurely with the other one. So I think I'm going to echo on that, just the comparisonitis, the paralysis analysis. There's now this pressure to find a fulfilling career now too.
That's interesting.
Our parents didn't have that pressure. Our parents were just do your job. You didn't have that pressure. So now there's this I'm at this job for 2 years and it doesn't feel fulfilling. Well, it's yeah, guess what? It's because you still need to prove yourself that you can go through. I mean, now I'm being, that person with the iron. Yeah. But it's because, everything's an in the meantime opportunity until you really can grow and mature and accept that you are becoming your dream. This is all part of the becoming. You just have to realize that. So I think that's my biggest takeaway. Lesson.
That's always a double-edged sword too, isn't it? Because on one hand, there's this really great thing about striving for a more fulfilling career, a more fulfilling life. And that's really awesome. I think that the millennial generation tends to tap into that. But on the flip side, like you said, there can also be this idea that, oh, this is just a stepping stone to the real fulfillment, which in a certain point can just be like your entire life then becomes one big stepping stone, and you're like 70 years old and you're like, oh wait, is this the fulfill? I guess it was somewhere back there somewhere. So yeah, that's a good perspective to share. Thank you for.
Yeah, I love that because it's so funny. I'm so used to viewing that perspective as like an opportunity, but because I'm like, we're in this field of like, advocating for millennials and like their perspectives, but I really love that, like, yeah, in a way that does put pressure on people, like, because it's like, oh, other people of my generation, because it becomes so, that expectation becomes normalized. We're talking about things being normalized. It's like having the most meaningful career is like a great value to have, but also it can be filled with pressure because you're kind of expecting, like, why am I not fulfilled, like, right now? What's happening? Yeah. That's such an astute observation.
Yeah.
And how do you help your clients manage some of those expectations? So, and you don't have to go into a specific detail necessarily. I know there's confidentiality there, but I'm just wondering, do you come across millennials who are endlessly seeking some idea of perfection out there? And how do you help support them in their journey while also helping set them up for success in life?
Yeah. So, wow. I think, part of it is the perspective piece. So it's evaluating where you're at. Is where you're at toxic? That's one thing. Is it shrinking you? Is it creating you, like making you slowly die? Or is it helping you grow? So that's like, it's like, I don't really ever say it like that, but introspectively, I look at those things. And then I also help people put perspective into, this is a journey. I'm talking more from the spiritual aspect, from the, fulfillment aspect. This is a journey and you are a part of this journey and you're growing. We're making progress. We're moving toward it, with all the right things aligned. And then also helping create a picture of perhaps the phase or the mindset that they're in and what we can do and what strategies we can take to move from one phase to the next is another piece. But then there's also more tactical job search and career strategic tactics and tools and talk tracks that my clients come to me so that they can be equipped with. So all those things combined help people feel like they're making progress. But from a big picture perspective, my mentality is, generally speaking, is we're becoming that. Like, we're part of this journey together where we're all seeking fulfillment, and the seeking and the doubting and the questioning of ourselves is all part of the growth to becoming that greater being that we want to become, or seeking that greater fulfillment. So I like to help people see that whatever challenge that they're facing right now, it's strengthening them. It's helping them grow. And now we just need to take that and set the right moves in place to keep you feeling like you're growing and feeling good.
Well, that is an inspiring note to end on here. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Evangelia.
Yeah, and actually, I think before we wrap up, would you introduce your daughter? Because we can hear her beautiful soul in the background, and I just want to acknowledge her. Would you be willing to do that?
Aww, you just made my heart flutter. That's so nice, because yes, I will introduce her. Her name is Deanna, and she just, oh my gosh, the second I looked at her and smiled, she smiled back.
Aww.
And I think she's smiling because of what you said earlier to me, which is you're all inclusive here. And that's been a big, as a mom, you're like, oh my gosh, how do I, this is unprofessional. But yeah, she does work from home with me right now. So, so thank you for including me.
You're a great team. I know. Well,
excellent.
Anytime anything's happening, I always just remember, have you seen the BBC video of the gentleman who's giving an interview on Korea?
Good reminder.
And suddenly everything just blows up. The children burst into the room. The mother is dashing after them. And I'm just like, you know what? We can all stand and take ourselves a little less seriously. So.
And just be like, hey, meet the world.
Exactly. That's right. These are all part of the reality and part of the joy that is our multifaceted, inclusive being. So. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Would you mind sharing with our audience where they can find out more about you and your work?
Sure. So my website, www.evangelia, Evangelia, LeClaire, LeClaire.com. And my Instagram handle is the same, at Evangelia LeClaire.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, Evangelia.
Great.
Thank you guys so much.
We have a gift for you. If you go online to motivationalmillennial.com/free gift, you can receive a personal transformation guide called Motivating Your Millennial Mind. It includes an outline of some of the limiting mindsets that we commonly have as millennials, as well as 8 motivational tools to help you overcome those mindsets. So again, check that out at motivationalmillennial.com/free gift. That's millennial, MILLENNIAL. Hello and welcome to the after show for our conversation with Evangelia LeClaire. It's so amazing. When Evangelia reached out to me via email and I saw that her last name was LeClaire, I totally thought it was going to be spam or something. I was like, is this real?
I thought you were thinking it was some distant relation who had just discovered you and been like, did you know we're secretly sisters?
Well, I mean, it's spelled not totally differently, but it's spelled differently. So I don't know. I mean, you get some weird kind of creative spam stuff in that makes you think. And anyway, so I opened it and just found out that she was this super awesome lady. We set up a conversation. We set up a call to have a conversation and it was really great and just loved her. So I feel really grateful that she reached out and that we were both LeClaires, and it's just, her name is spelled the way people think my name should be spelled. It was just so funny and synchronistic. I love it. And so I'm really grateful to have her on the show and chatted with her today. It was a great conversation.
So what did you enjoy from the conversation with Evangelia?
Well, I really loved in the millennial perspective question that she was talking about fulfillment as being kind of this sense of pressure, like finding a career that's fulfilling to you can be this sense of pressure. Mm-hmm. And I loved that perspective. I know I touched on it a little bit during the actual conversation, but I love it, one, because I kind of just love it when the perspectives and beliefs I have are sort of turned on their head. I just think that's such a good mental exercise. And I think that it was really astute and accurate because I know that I put on myself, actually, when I reflect on it, a lot of pressure to be happy and fulfilled. And, right now, for me, the career question isn't the biggest thing on my mind because I feel really happy with my career. I love this work that we're doing. So that box is checked in that way, at least at this time. But when I think about fulfilling life or happiness, in general, it does feel like pressure. And it kind of reminded me of something that she had talked about earlier in the conversation about how she's learning to find sort of acceptance and self-love in a way for her alternating moods, And I think that for me is still something that I'm practicing, which is releasing the expectation that I'm going to be happy all the time. The happiness is, or enlightenment or whatever, is a state that you can reach and then permanently be at. And for me, that feels like a lot of pressure. And so I think that when we look at happiness and fulfillment as something that we have to race to get to, and then once we're there, all the challenges will be done and everything will be amazing, it makes a lot of sense when you view it through that lens. And when you're on Facebook or something and you're scrolling through all of these different positivity memes and whatever, you can feel jaded and feel like it's not even a real thing. Fulfillment is just this puff phrase and happiness is just this, pipe dream or something, Yeah,
it's an interesting generational shift too. She alluded to this slightly, the whole idea of the boomers and to a certain extent Gen X. It was just you went to work because it was your job. You weren't supposed to have your whole identity and sense of self be also fulfilled by your work. And I think it's interesting because now I wonder if where it used to be what is the highest paying job you can get that you maybe don't completely hate. Now I think we've sort of replaced the money as the goal with like happiness. It's like, what's the job that makes you the most fulfilled? And yeah, still like pays all right, but like it's got the community and the sense of self, and you're doing something meaningful in the world. And like those are all good things. I mean, it's great that we've shifted beyond just salary as some demarcation of happiness. But you're right, there is this whole other rubric that we start applying, and because social media makes the comparison so visceral, like she was saying in her advice about not being comparativitis all the time, because social media makes it all so visceral, it can be really easy to constantly feel like you never have enough all the time.
Yeah, I think because, like you said, we shifted the rubric, but we're still using a rubric that we're somehow applying to like all of our peers and all of everyone in the world, you know, when really we each have an individual rubric in a way, right? Mm-hmm. Like each of it, fulfillment means something different for every single person. And when we start to generalize the phrase fulfillment or generalize happiness as to looking a certain way and then comparing ourselves and comparing our own fulfillment, that's not really what fulfillment is, you know. It's just that's when it takes on less meaning. And, you know, I think really just the knowledge that fulfillment is more of an orientation, more of a practice, more of a perspective on your path rather than a destination, you know. It's so funny. This whole thing reminds me of this conversation that I had with my coach recently. I think when you're really into personal development and really into growth and that sort of thing and like seeking out that happiness, you know, like deliberately doing everything that you can in your power to find that, it can feel sometimes disillusioning. Wow, that was a 1,000-point word right there. To realize that sadness and depression, or particularly like in my case, like I do have struggled with mental health issues and still struggle with mental health, meaning anxiety and depression. You know, those things, if they may come back, and they probably will come back, right? You're not going to be happy every moment, every day of your life. Like that would be so freaking awesome, but that's not. And the point is that you're not doing anything wrong. And so I divulged to my coach, I was like, I guess I just feel like I've worked really hard and like things are still hard, you know, things are still hard. Like why? I feel like I've like just done all of this intense therapy and growing and all of these things. And she was saying, yeah, it kind of sounds like you like had this bargain with the universe. And I was like kind of arguing. I was like, I don't know. But she's like, it's kind of like the universe was like, okay, if you go and you clean your room, I'm going to give you a candy bar at the end of that. And then you went and cleaned the crap out of your room. And then the universe was like, never mind, like there's no candy bar. Like this is just kind of like how life is. And you're like, what the hell? I mean, that, you know, and I had to struggle with that for a little bit. And I guess when I say recently, that was like a couple months ago. But I think it was really helpful to just think of that I'm not doing anything wrong. We're not doing anything wrong when we're not feeling happy in that moment. We're not doing anything wrong. We don't feel fulfilled in that moment. And it's just about an orientation and a practice, not about this permanent state of being.
Yeah, and I think that's why we try to find quantifiable proxies for happiness, because it's like, I might not be able to feel happy in this moment, but if I get 50 likes on this photo, then that's like being happy, and it's more replicable than, like you're saying, than doing all this hard work, and then there's no guarantee that at the end of the hard work you're gonna actually feel fulfilled. And so I like what you said earlier about fulfillment as an orientation rather than a goal.
Right, it is. I mean, but it's also important to notice those times when you are feeling fulfilled and when you are feeling happy. Like literally, like this morning I was like pouring my bowl of cereal and I was like, oh my God, I feel really good right now. Like, I just feel so happy. And then I started like analyzing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, what does this mean that I'm happy? I wonder how long it's going to last. Like, you know, should I blog about this? Because it's like, it feels so rare. But like, I don't think that's true. I think that if I were actually, you know, practicing more awareness around those moments that I'm feeling just like peaceful and like good, that over time, they're starting to outweigh the times where I feel really, really scared, about life. So
yeah, there's a Will Smith video that's been making the rounds, and you sent it to me actually.
I did, yeah.
Which is funny because it aligned from a couple different people at the same time, which was awesome. But one of the things he talks about in the video is just how unnecessary fear is. And if you haven't seen the video, you can check it out. But basically, he's saying that he was going skydiving with his friends, or is this a hypothetical?
No, he really did, because he saw footage of him doing it.
Oh, I must have not watched the whole thing. So, the point.
Were you listening to it or something?
Oh, that was him. Oh, I thought they were just intersplicing footage. Okay,
no, it was him.
Okay, cool. It was very small. It was in the message window. I wasn't watching it on full screen.
He was telling a story about how they made this drunk pact to go skydiving, and then he did it.
Okay, clearly I didn't take away the setup of the story.
You got the heart of it.
I just got the point of it, which was... So anyway, he and his friends make this pact to go skydiving. He said they're so worried the night before, and you get up into the plane, and then you're stressing out, and you're the plane doors open, and they said, okay, on 3, and they go 1, 2, and they push you on 2, because if they actually wait to 3, you'll throw your arms up and try to grab the door. And so he said, and in that moment of maximum danger, when you are falling from the plane before your parachute deploys, he said, you are most free and most fulfilled. And it made me think about this past week. I've done a couple assemblies across the state of California. Just assume people know what state I'm going to say. Across the state. Which state? The state of mind. And I was doing a new variation on a speech about the growth mindset and the story we tell ourselves about who we are and what things mean in our lives. And I was really worked up about it just because it's middle school students, and that's always a more challenging audience.
It was a rough time
for
me.
Because they always end up loving it, but they can't show that they're loving it because they got to be cool. So you get a lot of this fake resistance, which you just have to ignore because it's not about you. But anyway, so I was kind of worked up before the speech, and then afterwards, there were some challenges, of course, but none of them were challenges I'd actually worried about. Of course I remembered the whole speech and all my points and everything. The challenges that came up were, things completely out of my control. And so it was such a good reminder just for me to not worry. Just be prepared and let it go. And so that's something I've really been trying to focus on a lot more, is what Evangelia talked about with faith, and really just in those moments of doubts, in those moments of uncertainty, just releasing that fear, because it really doesn't help. We've been trained all our lives to think if we're afraid and we worry about it, that means we're preparing for it. Preparing for it means you're preparing for it. And that's practicing. You're not worried when you're preparing for it because you're doing it. It's the anticipation of the preparing for it. That's, I need to rehearse. If I don't rehearse, it's going to be terrible. That's where the problem is, not in the actual rehearsing part. That's fine. So.
And some things you just can't prepare for, and you just have to trust that when you are in that moment and hits the fan, that you will be able to handle it.
Yeah.
That you can handle it in that moment. You couldn't prepare for XYZ crazy stuff happening, and that's just the way life is in a lot. So worry, and it's an illusion of control.
Yeah, which brings me to the point I wanted to piggyback off of, which was related to Evangelia's piece about fulfillment as well, which is that so much of that comes from this idea that there is a perfect life for us out there, or a perfect version of ourselves out there. And that, like you said, if we can only just tick enough boxes, or do enough personal work, or get enough promotions, or get enough money, then we'll reach that place. And Jim Carrey speaks about this beautifully in a commencement address when he says, or maybe it was a award ceremony, he's like, I just wish everyone could be rich and famous, so they realize that's not the answer to anything. Your happiness is completely unrelated to how rich and how famous you are. But it feels so quantifiable to say, that person's rich, therefore I respect them. And it's true to a certain extent that there are privileges afforded to people who are perceived as rich and famous. And I think that's part of what we want, is this idea that at least, even if we're not happy, we'll be more comfortable. And I've recognized that, but it's what I talk to students. Students come up to me a lot of times and say, are you famous? And I kind of don't know what to tell them, because the obvious answer is no. I mean, the total sum of people who know me versus some of people who know Will Smith or Jim Carrey, the ratio is incomparable. But I'm but what I usually just tell them is, I'm here with you. And so the fact that I have the opportunity to speak with you and all your friends today, that means something to me. And if you want to call that being famous or being respected or being appreciated or being given the privilege of sharing something with you, then yes, like I'll accept that and say I'm thankful for that opportunity.
Do you say that whole thing every time?
I say it a couple times, depending on, like, I mean, the kids just passing by, I usually just say, I was like, you know, well, I've got a bunch of videos on YouTube, you can check them out. So I usually don't do the whole pontification. But, you know, in one of the recent assemblies I did, I won't identify, there was a student who was yelling out during the presentation a few times, and he wasn't doing it so frequently enough, which I wanted to interrupt the thing to stop him, but he was doing it frequently enough, it was disruptive. And so at the end of it, I just went up to him and I just said, hey man, I noticed you were yelling out a lot. I understand that was probably, you just wanted attention, and I understand that, but I do want you to know that I did feel it was disruptive for my presentation, and I'm disappointed by that. But I also want you to know that I believe in you, and I can tell you've got so much energy, and I want you for the rest of the school year to focus on applying that energy to something that's meaningful and to helping other people. Because I know you have that in you. I can tell you've got a positive spirit. And he was just sort of sitting there floored for a second. I just shook his hand and I said, I really do believe in you. And he was just like about to cry. Just like, thank you. You know, I was glad because I worried I was being too strict with him and too intense with him. But what I really realized was everybody needs that affirmation for who they are. Because I think we feel like we all have to be different and perfect, which is try and tie it back into what I was saying earlier. I know it's a bit of it went pretty far afield, but it's this whole idea that we can't be happy until we're perfect, or we should always be trying to be more perfect, and we can be better without being perfect.
Well, I just want to say that I think it speaks a lot to you and your values and who you are as a person that you took that challenge and turned it into an opportunity, as we like to teach people. And you didn't turn it into an opportunity like for you. You turned it into an opportunity for him. And I think that for some people that could have easily gone a totally different way. Like just feeling you were coming from your, I guess I would say soul, but you're coming from like your heart and soul rather than from your ego. Mm-hmm. And, you know, rather than saying, oh, that kid sucks. And, you know, like, but you looked past that. And I think that says a lot about who you are.
Well, thank you. And you're right, because in the moment when I was delivering the speech, I was angry. Like, I couldn't even look at him. I was so angry. Mm-hmm. But when it came time to interact with him afterwards, I could just tell, like you said, it wasn't about me. Mm-hmm. Like, he was doing it for his own reasons, for his own whatever he had going on in his life. And you're right, which was surprising for me. I didn't pre-plan what I was going to say to him.
Right.
I just went over to him and I just like looked him straight. You know, I got down, like I looked him straight in the eyes, and in retrospect, it was really intense. Like,
yeah, and vulnerable and authentic. Mm-hmm. And I think that we talked about authenticity in this. We talk about it, you know, regularly, but in this podcast specifically about how challenging that is and how rare it is for people. So for you, just be honest with him, because he knew what he was doing. If you had gone over to him and just like pretended like everything was okay, you know, that wouldn't have been as effective, I don't think, as you just being really honest about his behavior, but not shaming him for it, mm-hmm. you know, and that's what we need, you know, just in the way that we treat ourselves, the way that we treat others, but having compassion for ourselves, having compassion for others. And so knowing that when we're having those, like I'm thinking about, you know, not only can we apply this such a great example to other people, but how do we apply this to ourselves? And when we're throwing tantrums or something, you know, like stressed out, and it's like, why is this happening? And like, I'm just gonna say whatever and just lay all day and, you know, have Netflix binge or something, which can be really good for you in that moment. But sometimes it's just like a tantrum, like a screw this, screw y'all. Like, I'm gonna, like, for me, this is my speaking from my personal experience. Like, you know, we all have various forms of that, but not shaming ourselves after that. Just saying, you know what, this was just our way of acting out. You know what I mean? And like loving ourselves for that, and continuing saying that message to myself. I believe in myself, even though, you know, like, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, having that compassion, which I think, to sort of tie it up, brings us to what Evangelia was saying too, and when she was sharing her really vulnerable story about supporting her family growing mm-hmm. up. And I think it does give us that sense of compassion, and for her, really gave her a sense of empathy just about what struggles everyone is going through. And like you said, important to include ourselves in that everyone is going through struggles. And just that kindness, it's so hard because, especially when we're rushed, when we're tired, when we're frustrated, anything, it can be so easy to just default to the lashing out at others or ourselves. And so that's a great reminder to be compassionate to all people.
Well, this has been a great after show, and we just want to express our gratitude to you all for listening and for sticking around. We wish you much compassion, self-compassion, and love.
Yes, and we wish you would also join us next week on the Motivational Millennial Podcast. Bye.
Bye.
For show notes and upcoming guests, or to learn more about Coactive Coaching, the blog, and our other awesome offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is edited by Christy Hostler and Team Podcast.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Blake Brandis.
Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!